No, it doesn't address only the treatment or the HIV per se, but it goes beyond that. And it goes beyond to change existing structures, institutions, and gender relations, so as to redefine gender roles. That's the most interesting part of gender transformative strategy. And gender transformative program promotes shared power, control of resources, decision making, and empowerment. So it goes beyond the treatment, the sensitization, the awareness purely on HIV. It attempts to change the structure, which is of course very exciting for me. But you know, again, my troubling issue in this is, of course, I don't know whether the paper will cover it or not. You know, when Michael Foucault talks about this whole concept of gaze, you know, he's a psychologist, who talks about this gaze, the clinical gaze. You know, when we look at the HIV people in Northeast India, and how the physicians per se look at them, now that's a very, very troubling issue for me. Foucault calls it the clinical gaze, through which one sees the body. You know, this is the way human body also enters the field of power. You know, you are the powerless, HIV positive, and here is the physician who is actually judging you, who is not just judging you physically, clinically, but also, you know, morally and so many other aspects of a human emotion. So that is my major troubling point as a sociologist. And with this, I would like to introduce today's speakers to all of you. We have three speakers, three eminent speakers, I must say. Number one is Eugene Jimulinda. He's from the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, from Rwanda. And he has been doing extensive work among the defense personnel, and he'll be sharing that experience with us. Then we have Martha Sturzer. She belongs to Global Health Communication, and which has worked extensively on public health. And she'll be talking to us about Mozambique. And then lastly we have Sada Memedovic. Yeah. Right? He belongs to an organization called Association XY from Sarajevo. And this organization works in the area of advocacy, human rights, prevention, reproductive health, research, sex education, and testing and counseling. So with that, I would first like to request Eugene to come and speak on combating sexual gender-based violence in communities, a DoD success story. DoD is Department of Defense.
Thank you, Chair, for the kind introduction. So I am Eugene Jimulinda, and I am the Department of Defense, U.S. Department of Defense, PEPFAR Program Manager. So what I will be speaking about is our interventions as the DoD in combating gender-based violence, but in particular, I will be sharing sexual gender-based violence. So this is my outline. I will give a brief background of my country, Rwanda. I will just touch base on the definition of gender, because we are in our gender programming, a bit of gender-based violence, and the policy framework that is behind all these interventions we do, and our strategies as a DoD, and then some building networks, legal advocacy in the community in particular, and then I end up with a few conclusions. So this is a bit background of Rwanda. I should have brought this actually, the map of Africa as well, so that you better have a good feel of where Rwanda is. But suffice to say, it is in the East African region, for those who know Africa quite well. In the north, we have Uganda. In the east, we have Tanzania. In the south, we have Burundi. And in the west, we have DRC. I'm not sure that makes sense, but that is where Rwanda is. It's a very small country, about 27 square kilometers, actually one of the smallest in Africa, probably the size of mainland back in the years. Administratively, it has 4 provinces, including the city of Kigali, which is the 5th one. And the economy, it's a poor country, about 644 GDP. 44% of the inhabitants live under the poverty line. Access to clean water, about 74% in urban have access to clean water, whereas in the rural, 89%. So briefly, that is really the background of Rwanda that I will be talking about. So definition of gender. I think everybody in this room really knows. I don't need to repeat this, but suffice to repeat what WHO says is the definition of gender. It refers to the socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society considers appropriate for men and women. This is a WHO definition, and I'm very sure everybody in the room is aware of that. So, let me touch just a bit about gender. So, gender disparities, and I think we've seen so many in here, are embedded in economic, social, and political attributes associated with being a male or a female. And the social definition of what it means to be a man or a woman may vary among cultures, within cultures, ethnic group, religion, and by age. Again, this has been said over and over again in this work, in this symposium. The gender inequalities in the distribution of power, resources, and responsibilities between men and women create an environment that supports high-level, intimate, or partner violence. In the plenary, we had this again over and over. So, in Africa, just like any other part of the world, GBV is perpetrated against women in an extremely complex issue resulting from and perpetrated by various societal, economic, and cultural factors. Recent findings in my country indicate that 31% of women are subjected to domestic violence after the age of 15, generally by a husband or intimate partner. Physical, social, economic, spiritual violences are all common phenomenon across my country and everywhere else. Allow me to quote the former Secretary General, Kofi Annan, when he said, "Violence against women is perhaps the most shameful human rights violation and is perhaps the most pervasive. It knows no boundaries, geography, culture, or wealth. As long as it continues, we cannot claim to be making real progress towards equality, development, and peace." I found this quotation really quite strong, and I thought I'd share with you. Now, Rwanda has made tremendous success in gender equality, gender justice, and there are reasons behind this. So, even for us that I'm able to share our experiences is because there are very positive policy frameworks that the government came up with towards gender issues. And I would like to just highlight a few of them. For example, Law number 23 of 1999 of November 12, 1999, to supplement Book 1 of the Civil Code to institute Part 5 regarding matrimonial regimes, liberties, and successions. Another law, number 08/2005 of July 2005, is about determining the use and management of land in Rwanda. Another law, number 27 of 2005 of April 2001, it's about it's relating to rights and protection of children against violence. Another law, number 54 of 2011, is about the rights and protection of the child. Yet another law of 2008 is on the prevention and punishment of gender-based violence. Another law is about the ratification and adoption of domestication of gender and GBV related to international and regional instruments. So I'm mentioning some of this so that we know where we are and how helpful to have these policies as we address gender issues. Against this background, and the reason why I'm here, I would like to share the Department of Defense strategic interventions we do to prevent or combat sexual gender-based violence. Of course, this is part of the gender-based violence, but I will be specifically talking about sexual gender-based violence. Now, our objective as a program is improve the quality of care, provide survivors, and address the fundamental inequalities between men and women. And we have some specific activities. Among these is engage in awareness raising at the national, district, local, family, and even at the individual level. So we do a lot of awareness raising. We train senior leadership, including the military leadership, to gain buy-in on gender-related issues. We realize that we cannot do much unless we involve the top leadership in the local military that we work in. And this is very, very useful. For a successful program, you must get the buy-in of the leadership. We do implement deliberately key messages on gender norms and how they are learned and constructed. There are deep-rooted gender norms that we really have to address. The social construction of masculinity and femininity. This has been talked over and over again in this symposium. The link between alcohol and SGBV. In a military situation, and it is across the whole world, the issue of alcohol vis-a-vis GBV, and also how they contribute to HIV acquisition. Infidelity. We talk about infidelity issues. Perception of family planning, including condoms, negotiation around the condoms, how this can bring about GBV, sexuality and gender, perception of female empowerment, and negative stereotypes that perpetuate risky behaviors, harmful situations, violence, and other forms of abuse. So we specifically give out messages on these interventions. We mobilize and train communities on methods to prevent SGBV. We build the capacity of service providers on the quality of health services offered to survivors of SGBV. We train social workers and teachers on appropriate legal and psychosocial support strategies. And of course, we provide supplies and commodities for clinical services. For example, emergency contraceptives, post-exposure prophylaxis, forensic evidence in case of legal issues that will come later. We strengthen referrals from health facility to other support facilities. For example, somebody may need psychosocial support, somebody may need legal interventions, so we need to facilitate the referrals from the health facility to these other services. And the link, we do have in Rwanda what we call one-stop center that has physical examination and treatment, it has psychosocial support, and is linked to the CID and the police that do the investigations for legal purposes. So this one-stop center is very, very crucial. And of course, we educate men and women about their rights and gender norms. And one other important thing that we work with the police on how they can get the forensic evidence needed in case of legal issues later on. So there is a good collaboration with the police officers as well. Now, we need to do also a good work of networking, legal advocacy, and community education. So the survivors may need much more than the health needs. So they need also, as I mentioned, without repeating, the legal, housing, police protection. So we need a network around these issues. And through legal advocacy and community education efforts, community organizations have an important role to play in challenging the social norms that go along with the GBV. So in conclusion, distinguished guests, let me reiterate once more and say our struggle for gender equality and equity, gender justice, inclusion and social justice is paramount today and even in the future, and we must emphasize this. All should be given equal opportunity. No discrimination, no intimidation, no violence against women or men should be tolerated by any culture, tribe, and a nation of the world. Responding to gender-based violence is a process that will require social change. And we have had this repeatedly ever since this symposium. And for social change to be useful, the process must be participatory, meaning it is owned and led by, and for the members of the community who are in the best position to identify local realities and strategies for responding to this change that we are all talking about. Increasing the involvement of men and boys in gender-based programming cannot be overemphasized, and I must say this symposium has come at the right time with the right theme. Community buy-in, community involvement, and leadership should be part of efforts to change our gender norms. I've mentioned earlier on that for us as DOD, working in the military, we really have to involve, and we've been doing this, involving the military leadership for strong, successful programming. Addressing gender-based violence should be considered a component of all our programming. So whether we are doing other HIV prevention, whatever we are doing, we must incorporate gender issues in all the programs we are doing. And we should always have an evaluation component to know where we are going, to know the weaknesses, and how we can do better. And we need to do a better job at addressing women's legal needs of protection. Quite often, something wrong happens and people keep quiet. So we need to do more of the legal part of it. Allow me to quote President Nelson Mandela, who said, "It always seems impossible until it's done. We can do this." I'm talking about no intimidation, no violence, no gender discrimination. It seems impossible, but we can do it. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Michael Grillo, the U.S. Department of Defense, Kerry Woodland, U.S. Department of Defense, the Rwanda Defense Forces, who are our beneficiaries, the Druckers International, one of the partners we work with, Society for Family Health, another partner that we work with, and the Gender Technical Working Group, PEFA Rwanda. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Eugene, for really not letting me go buzz and finish right on time. Next, we have a presentation by by Martha. She'll be talking about Men's Day, a narrative intervention for changing behavior and male social norms related to GBV. Martha.
Good afternoon once again, and my name is Martha Scherzer. I'm the director of an organization called Global Health Communication, and as BJ said, I'll be talking about a very specific intervention that we're using with men to try to change behavior and start addressing social norms around gender-based violence and HIV. So I will talk a little bit about my organization, Global Health Communication, and then go straight into the approach that we use. It's called RAMP. I'll give you a little bit of the context for I'll give you a little bit of the context for Southern Africa and Mozambique in particular, and then we'll talk about the story that is at the center of the intervention that we do, and some results, and then the conclusion. So RAMP is a narrative intervention that Global Health Communications designed and developed and created. It stands for Reflection and Action Within Most At-Risk Populations. And we created this intervention a number of years ago in a cross-border setting, actually, in Southeast Asia, working with mobile populations, trying to have the opportunity to work with people using stories over repeated sessions to try to build some relationships, but recognizing that mobile populations and most at-risk populations are often difficult to meet on regular bases. So we developed something that could be easily shared with people and passed along to others. This has evolved quite a bit now, and it's a very adaptable and flexible intervention. What we're working with now in Mozambique is a 16-hour intervention, and this is generally happens in 3 half-day sessions. So it's about 4 hours each session, and then at 2-week intervals we have 2 different follow-up sessions after the initial intervention. And the intervention begins with a story which we create based on the target population we want to work with and the behavioral objectives that we're hoping to address with them. We then use that story to take small groups of people through a process of prioritization, looking at the issues and concerns in the story, having people prioritize those issues and concerns and relate them to their own lives as well. We look at the problems and issues in terms of what's most important to least important, and what's easiest to change or most feasible to change to most difficult to change. And then we move on to the next of our 4 action phases and look at group activities that could be undertaken to address some of these specific things. We often come up with very specific work plans for groups to work on. And then we have the 3rd phase, which looks at individual steps or individual actions that people can take. And we have people sign an informal kind of behavioral contract as well to commit to some of the changes that they want to make. And the 4th action phase is the follow-up sessions that we have, at 2-week intervals after the initial intervention. And throughout the intervention, we do have a strong emphasis on linkages to services. And this might be traditional kind of health services like HIV testing, but then we find many of our participants need a wide range of services like legal services, or even their national identity or birth certificates, registration, that kind of thing. As I mentioned, RAMP is a very flexible and adaptable intervention. The underlying principles are the same regardless of the target population, the location you're in, the behavioral topic that you want to work on, and that is all dependent on the kind of story that you create. So just to give you some background, I would really like to call attention to some research that's been done in the field of gender-based violence and HIV, particularly in Southern Africa. And the citation at the bottom of the slide there is some work that was done by Rachel Jukes, she's here at this conference. She presented earlier today. And just some of the main points, or very relevant points from her research that applies, I think, as well to the work that we're doing. Overall, in sub-Saharan Africa, more women are infected with HIV than men. Men who are violent are also more likely to be sexually risky, and men who have sexual risk behavior are also much more likely to be violent. In the view of Rachel Jukes and her colleagues, they believe that HIV prevention can really be best achieved by trying to change gender identities rather than really focusing on individual sexual behaviors. So obviously when we're talking about changing social norms and trying to come up with interventions that can have a large impact, this is very important for our work. Mozambique, the Mozambique setting is as a neighbor to South Africa. We're on the east coast of Southern Africa. It's quite a long country with significant differences between north and south in terms of language, culture, religion, and history. It's a Portuguese-speaking country as well. And in terms of gender and HIV, we do see some of the points highlighted in the research I just mentioned, where there are more women infected than men infected with HIV, and the discrepancy is particularly notable at younger ages as well. In terms of gender and gender-based violence, there have been some questions asked on recent DHS surveys, but there's very little other research conducted on gender-based violence, particularly qualitative research that goes into some depth about it. We do feel that there are some similarities and important similarities with South Africa in terms of the hegemonic masculinity that really kind of requires that men have multiple partners and have that one very important definition of masculinity in terms of their sexuality and many partners. The concept of emphasized femininity supports this, and at the same time, while men have multiple partners and they may be, because of that, a little less trustworthy, women also tend to want multiple partners as well in case one or two of those men kind of drop out of the picture, that they also have a backup. So we're working in an area where many people have multiple partners, and there's a significant, obviously significant HIV epidemic. So in this context, we created a story for our RAMP intervention that we believe addresses a number of these different issues, and that we are now using with groups of men. The story is called Men's Day, and I do have to give you some background on the concept of Men's Day. I'm a little bit reluctant to talk about it in an international context for fear that other countries might like the idea. But Men's Day is, in fact, every Friday in Mozambique. And the idea is it's a day when men can go out and do whatever they want to do, wherever they want to do it, with whomever they want to do, and no one can ask any questions about it. That's the idea. So every Friday is Men's Day. And you can imagine it kind of creates quite a rich background for some dramatic storytelling. So this is the title of our story. It's a 40-minute film, and GHC, Global Health Communication, created the script, and a Mozambican production company produced and filmed the video with Mozambican actors. It all takes place in Maputo. So this is kind of our summary of the story. The main characters are Gaspar and Paulo, who are office mates, they're work colleagues. Paulo is always trying to get Gaspar to go out on a Friday night with him. Sometimes Gaspar goes with him, sometimes he does not. At the beginning of the story, they do go out one night, and Gaspar ends up going home to his wife Marta on the right, and when she asks questions about where he's been, he's quite upset and ends up hitting her. Eugenia on the left is an office colleague of Gaspar and Paulo as well. She's dealing with some of her own issues at home. Her husband wants her to stop working and stay at home, and he's also refusing to get tested for HIV with her. And then we have Natercia and Laura, who are sex workers who frequent the bar where Paulo and Gaspar often go on a Friday afternoon or Friday after work. And Natercia and Gaspar have something of a relationship, and so the story brings up lots of different issues in a lot of different ways that we then bring to the groups of men that we're working with right now. What is really interesting about working with stories in general is that everyone sees something different generally in the story. So men sometimes relate more to one character or another, or to one of the situations or another. But there are many relevant issues that are covered in the story. So the film was just completed in June of this year, and since then we have gone through our ramp process with about 100 men. In our prioritization process, these are some of the most common issues raised, and these are issues clearly brought up in the film. Physical violence, alcohol consumption, men's refusal to take an HIV test, unprotected sex, and negative influence from friends. Just last week, in fact, on my way here, I was in northern Mozambique observing one of my staff going through this process with a group of men, and they came up with some very interesting priorities. So I just wanted to add these and talk a little bit about these priorities that the group identified. So it was a group of about 18 men in Nampula in northern Mozambique, and they came up just among themselves with a lack of communication between spouses as a number one problem, both in importance and feasibility to do something about, which I thought was quite interesting. They talked quite a lot also about psychological GBV and the idea of husbands trying to control their wives. And there's always quite a lot of discussion in these sessions about whether, how women provoke men to be violent. And we were able to work with this group and kind of turn that around from something that's a problem of what the women are doing to that, to say that may be the case where you may feel provoked by women, but as a man, since it's a group of men here and we're talking about behavior, what is it, how can we look at this in a way that men can work on a behavioral issue that could improve the situation? So together we came up with this concept of managing emotions and reactions even when men feel that they've been provoked. In action phase 2 and 3 of the RAMP process, we come up with these very concrete, actionable items. So I wanted to give you an example of some of these. When the issue was a lack of communication between spouses, then our behavioral objective is to have good communication and to create conditions for better communication. So talking to the men about how they could do that, these are all issues that they thought of themselves and felt were feasible, they're possible for them to do, and they felt that would be appreciated by their partners and could then lay the foundation for improved communication. So it's, there are things that are not necessarily so difficult to do, but it was a very important process for the men together to be talking about what they could do, including just leaving the house nicely and letting your wife know when you're leaving the house, kissing her goodbye. And again, when you come home, kiss her hello or say that, let her know that you're back instead of just leaving her early in the morning and not coming back till late at night and really having no interaction with her. So this is an important part of our process, that men then can feel that when they leave these sessions, they have specific things that they can begin to work on. So 2 weeks after this last session, the same group of men will come together again in the same location in our offices. And we do have GHC staff there to facilitate this, and they're organizing it. But the really important part of this step is that the men are sharing their own experiences, and it does really function like something of a support group, where some of them have been more successful in their behavior change, and they're able to share those experiences with people who are still struggling or perhaps have not tried yet to make those changes. I would like to point out a couple of things that we've learned by using this story, and again, why I think the use of stories is really very important and very relevant. Thank you. We are often able to learn things that we really probably would not have been able to learn otherwise about how people are thinking and what's going on, particularly with such a complex issue like gender-based violence and concepts of gender in general. In the film, when Gaspard hits his wife Marta, that scene begins with an argument. He comes home late. She's waiting up for him. She's quite upset. They sit on the couch and they're talking about it. It becomes an argument. Their voices are raised. And that becomes a little bit more heated, and then she stands up, and then he stands up, and they continue arguing, and then he hits her. And the first time we showed this film to a group of men and went through the steps with them, the men all said, well, clearly, she was asking for it. She provoked him. Okay, why is that? She stood up first. Just that simple, what seems simple, the gesture, and it's a physical gesture, that she stood up before he did in the midst of an argument, and men felt that was completely justifying the husband hitting the wife. So, of course, this is something that I would never have thought to ask men. Or, what are the cues, or how do you even ask that? But through the use of this story, we were able to understand there's so many different levels, and it's not only the words people say, but it's clearly even just a physical action like standing up. Also, through the follow-up sessions that we've had, we found many men are very eager to make some of these changes, and they seem to really want to do something concrete. The film does not in any way talk specifically about men helping out around the house. That's not an element of the film, but that is something that almost all of the men have talked about in terms of wanting of improving relations with their partners or the situation in their home, that they could help their partners around the house. So many of the men then went home and picked up the broom and started sweeping or started doing the dishes or started trying to help cooking. And you know, it's not always appreciated by women, as I've heard many other people here in the conference talk about. Women feel that the men are doing that because they're not happy with the way women are doing that, or they feel that men are now invading their kind of space in the home. So we have also had to kind of adapt and learn from this and talk to the men about, again, better communication, and talk to your partners before you just decide to pick up the broom, and let them know what's going on in this intervention that you've been a part of as well. One thing that came up just, again, this past week in Nampula that I thought was interesting, just through the course of discussion, was an idea that men should never let their wives really know them, and that men should kind of keep the women and their wives in particular sort of guessing about who they are and what they want and how things are going. So that's also just something that's very important to be aware of, I think, as we are looking at gender and influences on all sorts of things, including HIV. So in the future, we plan to use the story with groups of women. Almost all of the men that we've worked with so far have said, we want you to do the same thing with our wives and with women in our lives. And we do plan to do that. We would also like very much to use the story with men and women together and look at the best way to do that. If they go through all the sessions together, or we do a combination of things. We're also in the process of having a protocol approved to do an outcome evaluation, and we hope to start baseline data collection by early next year. So in conclusion, I would like to emphasize that I think men really do value the chance to talk openly about relationships, even in cultures and in settings where there is little to no experience of doing that. Again, just being in this group of 18 men with a male Mozambican facilitator, it really was fascinating to me that how much men did open up and really clearly valued that opportunity. The structured use of stories that this RAMP approach uses is an excellent way to create that kind of safe space for dialogue and critical thinking that we've also been talking about here quite a lot, and for these kind of transformative discussions about masculinity. It's also very important, I think, to acknowledge the struggles and validate men's perspectives before you immediately start going into what's wrong with them or how they should change or what you want them to do instead. And the RAMP approach really was designed to allow people to identify their own priority problems and also to come up with their own solutions. So we think it really fits very well with this kind of intervention. Just very quickly, the RAMP participants, we've learned also in the setting of kind of that safety and a very open environment, are also more receptive to basic information, whether that's about HIV testing or condom use or laws around gender-based violence. Also that ongoing follow-up, even if we were able to do follow-up meetings beyond that, the 2 meetings at 2-week intervals, that would be wonderful. And then there are lots of opportunities for combining this particular intervention with other structural interventions for group or individual projects that would strengthen economic situations or skills-based activities for men in particular to strengthen their abilities to provide for the family and other things that we know are important for gender transformative outcomes. Thank you very much.
Oh, Martha. Martha, you really gave us a wonderful new methodology into understanding rather than actually going for, perhaps we realize that interventions need understanding of the respondent. And I'm sure many of us will like to take it up when we go back. Narrative is a very important concept. Okay, next we would like Fedha Mehmodovic to speak on making a healthy man, engaging men in promotion and provision of SRHR.
Thank you very much.
Fedha.
Okay, hello everyone. My session has 3 parts. So for the first part, your engagement is really important. So please, I will call you all to stand up, please. Thank you very much. So this is something called CC Cora. It's a really important thing, and some of people here recognize this. It's a good for start, who is a starting point for sessions, especially if you have a lunch before that. So we will do a short version of CC Cora, so you have to follow me and follow my voice. So when I do it slow, you have to do it slow. When I do it like a high scale, you have to follow it. Okay. And make small breaks after me. I will do it first. CC Cora. CC Cora. CC Cora. Agici gici maga, agici gici maga, agici gici maga, agici gici maga, 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 maga. Se cora, agici gici maga, agici gici maga, agici gici maga, agici gici maga, 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 maga. Just to add that nobody knows what does it mean.
That's 3 minutes gone.
Okay. Okay, my name is Fedha Mehmodovic. Quite similar.
Fedha.
Yeah, Fedha. It's a little bit different in our
Why
language.
did you like G then? You should like J.
It's a secret to be a little bit tricky.
Fedha.
So,
Sorry, Fedha.
yeah. Fedha Mehmodovic, and I'm working for Association XY organization in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the capital city of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Sarajevo. So my presentation is about different best practices in working with not only young men, but with different population of men. So I'll talk about prisoners, IDU, sex workers, MSM, gay men, young people who representing Mara, like most at-risk adolescents. So you will have a chance to ask questions related to the specifics of your interest. So this is insight just because I know that it's important for your perspective. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a really small country. It has only 4 million people. Dominant religions are Muslims, Orthodox, Catholics, so maybe some of you will find some, I don't know, inspiration related to that. Complicated administrative system, strong traditional patriarchy and the gender norms related to all these 3 religions. So we are post-war country, now in transition. Check this out, how many different aspects do we have. And what is quite interesting is what Einstein said in one occasion. He said, in every difficulty there is an opportunity. So I can say that Bosnia and Herzegovina is really a country with full potential to provide you different opportunities. Yeah. So XY organization, my organization, and this is my director, Eminent Speakers, is registered in 2001. So we are a full member of IPPF. IPPF is the International Parenthood Planning Federation, European network. So we have to fulfill different standards to become full members. So that's something what we really are proud to say, because it means that we are part of the huge international network and that we really know what we are doing. So there are 2 main strategic directions of my organization. So it's I can say promotion and protection of sexual and reproductive health and rights, and also promotion and I can say raising awareness activities related to the gender and healthy lifestyle. So we are working as an organization who is developing different approaches, but also working with the government on, I can say, helping in supporting government in achieving different goals. In this case, I mean Millennium Development Goals. So goal 3, promoting gender equality and empowerment of the woman. Also goal 5, improvement of maternal health. And one really important is combating HIV and AIDS. So, related to country, in my country, gender is something, and we can say not so recognized as an important aspect, especially related to the health. So, sexual and reproductive health of young men are not the health priority. So you will see that we have services mostly oriented and adapted to the specific needs of women, not the men. So men are not using them. Men, I don't recognize some of these services as relevant for their health. So it's a little bit complicated for the young men or men in general to deal with the different STIs, sexually transmitted infections, with the HIV, because they don't know about symptoms, they don't know where to seek help, they don't know how to do testing, and they are, I can say, strong masculinity effect on their attitudes. Do they need these services? Because in many cases, masculinity in Bosnia and Herzegovina is like that you don't need these services, you are a male don't seek health services, and male are dominant. So if you are seeking for help, you're not enough a man. So it's a little bit complicated for the young men and the men in general to be, I can say, healthy in the context of sexual and reproductive health. And from what I heard during this symposium, in every country it's quite similar that men who have different and many sexual partners is the dominant man. For the women, it's quite opposite. So it's quite complicated for them to meet their needs. So for the women, it's very hard to ask for the help or to talk openly if they have multiple sexual partners. And for the men, it's quite hard to talk openly with the health professionals about the different partners. So these medical services are not adapted to the specific need of each of these men. Many men in Bosnia and Herzegovina have a problem with the unmet needs, and what is quite depressive is that first sexual intercourse, what we find out with the different services, is 13.6 years old.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So about male population, we are dealing with different subgroups of men. So in the front you can see the general population of male. Then there are subpopulation groups like adolescents, Mara, prisoners, Amazons, sex workers, Roma people, and IDU. So in many cases you will find that some men are belonging to different subgroups. So in the, context of prisoners, you will see that there is prisoners who are providing sexual services, who are taking some drugs, and who are gay. So you can see that there is different perspective of vulnerability related to that specific man. So we are trying to adopt our services to all these specific needs of all these men. So it is not easy to do because you have general population and approach have to be completely different. You have prisoners, you need additional support and additional approaches. So in the last 12 years of our existence, we were trying to combine all the best practices from each program and project what we implement. But not only these, we are always seeking for the new ideas, new projects, and try to put it inside. So we started, on the first place, we started with this promotion of youth-friendly services, because in many cases, medical service is not really friendly. So people are scared to use these services. They're afraid to ask questions, and it's a little bit like I will come to just do what I have to do and run from it. So we work with the health professionals on sensitization about masculinity, about gender, about vulnerability, to have better perspective of if they are providing some services or service to one man, to understand that there is different perspective and different approaches what they can use in the provision of that service. Second thing is really important in the context of masculinity. It's a popular opinion leader. It was developed by American CDC, Center for Disease Control. On the beginning, it was a little bit complicated project for me, especially because it was hard to understand how to deal with the different popular opinion leaders. What are the popular opinion leaders in every group? When you go outside from this session, watch the small groups around this symposium. You will see that there is always one person who talks too much. They want to be in the center of the perspective. They want to say everything. They want to be teachers. They want to do. They want to lead that group. And you will see that in every group of 5 people there is one person like that. So your job is to reach these people. So you reach them, you teach them, and let them go. In the nature is to talk. In the nature is to be a leader. In the nature is to be educators. So if you provide them enough information, you will see that they will do voluntary job for you. It's really important, especially if you are working on masculinity. If you succeed to reach these tough leaders in these small subgroups, then you will see that these tough guys will change the masculinity norms in these small groups, especially in the prison. We tried with the educators. We tried to reach educators in the prison, like I can say usual guys in the prison. And we teach them, we provide the skills, we provide everything what they need, and we let them go. We let what they are doing in the prison. And we saw that it's not so effective. Then we reach these POL guys, like tough guys in the prison, teach them and let them go. And then we did the monitoring and evaluation, and we saw out that there was someone who gathered the prisoners, someone who wants to share the knowledge what they get on our sessions. So we find out that this popular opinion leader could work in every population, just have to be a little bit adapted. So there is the outreach element, especially for the male population which are not using health services. So basically we are providing information about health services. These outreach workers are also POL in their own communities. They provide also sessions, peer education session, and what is most important, you can see that there is the outreach work, down there is the peer education and peer counseling. So for our, you can say, outreach workers, educators, we always provide additional sessions and workshops and trainings to be able to provide counseling. It's a basic counseling. So we don't want to give you, to tell you you have to do this or you have to do that. No, we want to help you to make a better choice for yourself. So there is a cyber outreach because many people, especially male people, don't get in the places where we implement our preventive activities. So we find out, especially in the context of gay population, in Bosnia it's hard to be gay because there is no gay clubs, there is no places where you can meet someone who is gay. So we need to find some better place for reaching gay men. So the best place was internet, because we find that Planet Romeo is quite famous between gay men in Bosnia. They're using for the communication, for finding friends, for finding someone to be in a relation. So we trained our gay workers, gay outreach workers, to use this Planet Romeo as I can say, cyber outreach platform. So they make the announcements about gay Romeo parties in our city. So in communication with different members of this network, we reach them, we organize educational parties, and then inform people about medical services, and we developed something like healthy community of G population. Then there is a social marketing campaign combining with all these aspects there, because when you are working, if you talk about masculinity, who shape our masculinity? It's not that only our parents are shaping our masculinity. No, there is a strong influence of social norms. There is influence of your parents, your friends, your school, your religion, tradition, and stuff like that. So social marketing campaigns are important for facing and challenging all these different aspects, all these different factors of influence. So radio, television, social networks are all the channels for sending different messages in combination with all these aspects upstairs. So what are our results? It's increasement of sexual and reproductive health and rights knowledge, especially in the context of HIV and STIs. There is the increasement of awareness related to the STIs, because in many cases young men and men in general think that if someone has STI, it will be visible, so they will recognize, or they connect it with the hygiene. So you can, during the conversation, you can find out that they are thinking that if somebody is ugly or not good looking, that they maybe have some STI. But if you are looking very nice, like me now, then I'm just kidding. Then you don't have anything. So they don't need to use protection. So raising awareness is an important element of prevention. So significant shift toward more gender equitable attitudes, mostly in the schools and in the prison. Can you imagine that? Significant reducement of homophobia among adolescents, mostly in the schools, and can you imagine that in the prison too? Increasing usage of contraceptives and medical services among prisoners, Roma, MSM, and LGBT population. I have to add that we provide free of charge contraceptives and condoms. So For the first two who asked me some questions, I will give something like a surprise, but they will be related to this thing. And we can say that all these aspects that are, I have 5 minutes more, I need to.
Okay.
Since 2007, all these services what I mentioned, we make approximation that 200,000 men use some of them. So it's about testing, it's about contraception, it's about screening, it's about referrals. So we are trying to provide best quality of the service, but if we can't do it, then we will refer you to the place where you can find it. So conclusion is that it is hard to work on the smaller scale. Smaller interventions like this, what I mentioned, they are great, they are effective, but they are really, really, really costly. And expensive. So you have to find a better solution, something what will reach, I can say, a bigger number of people, and which will, I can say, be more sustainable. So we find out that government can be a good partner with that. So what we did, we developed 2 strategies related to the masculinity, related to sexual reproductive health in the first place. So we integrated masculinity and gender in these strategies, in strategies about sexual reproductive health. So we, with the collaboration with the government, set the priorities and make a recommendation for intervention and about developing projects for the preventive strategies. So something what is most important, what we did in the last year, was introduction of new subjects in the primary school. So what we find out that we can do prevention, we can do sessions on site, we can reach 100 people, 200 people, but after the project ended, we have a problem with the new generation. So we were really focused on advocating introduction of new subjects. So I have in our own language, this is what we did. We developed healthy lifestyle. It's a subject where you can find something about sexuality, something about gender, something about homosexuality, something about sexual orientation, something about masculinity, femininity, about nutrition, about physical activities, not the sport, physical activities. So everything is related to the gender. And if you go through, you can download it, but it's on our local language. So first you have to go to school to learn our language, and then it's quite challenging, like sexual and reproductive health in general. So you will be able to practicing different sessions, and you will see that this is a lifestyle education. It's not like you are learning about gender; it's about living it. And you can see something from 2000, when I was collecting all these materials, which you can use all around you, I found something from 2001. I was so proud of it, because this is something what we developed on the beginning. It was Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights brochure for the blind people. Wow. So you can see that we start in the beginning to adapt our services to different populations. So it was something what I really have to show you, and I have to bring it back, because this is I believe, yeah, and it was funded by IPPF. But you can see IPPF logo. There is a Sexual and Reproductive Health and our logo. Okay, so be free to ask the question. First two who ask the question will get the award. Yeah, and be free to take materials related to the different populations. Thank you.
We had to learn a lot from you, not just what you said, but how you said it. It was terrific. I mean, even after heavy lunch, we are suddenly awake. Thank you so much. So now we have this wonderful 3 presentations before us. Before I leave the house open, I will take the privilege of being a chair and give certain comments and also certain questions to all of you. And also, after that, I would like 3 of you first to, if you have anything to ask each other, I would like you to do that, and then we throw the questions to the house. Eugene, there was a wonderful presentation, and to give the laws. The laws were very illuminating, and I don't know how much, of course, as laws are, and how much they get implemented on the ground. It's for 1 to 3, I don't know how much that is done. But my question is not that. My question is that why do you think the need to go into the defense personnel to start this program on gender transformative strategy? And number two is that you see Africa, we read a lot of Africa simply because it has a lot of commonality with the Northeast India being the tribal society. And what we encounter there, I'm sure you must be encountering in African tribal societies too, is the big impediment of customary laws. And how does your progressive, interventions, especially on sexual intervention, how does the customary laws, because usually we see customary laws are very gender neutral or very gender blind, or in fact sometimes very anti-women. So how do you deal with that while working among the societies in Africa? Martha, this was I would love to, if there's no copyright, I would love to take on this methodology, because this is something, of course it is very holistic, it is very personal, definitely it takes a lot of time, it cannot have major macro, results, and it has to be at a micro level, and then probably micro, and then over a period of time, you make a broader generalization. And definitely, but I think I'm really all for your methodology. But I don't know how far people will be honest in their personal anecdotes. It is so personal, So how do you do that? I'm very interested to know about that. And Feda, you in the first slide you said that your country is Orthodox Catholic society with only 4 million population, and also there's a Muslim.
Majority is Muslim.
Majority is Muslim. I would like to know that how does religion, what is the church doing in this intervention? Because if you say that they're Orthodox communities, definitely the role of churches must be very important in their lives. So I would like to know from you that how does church intervene in such programs? And also, do you encounter the situations where the church says it goes against our tenets of teaching, so don't teach that? You're going to spoil the morality of the society. So do you encounter such things? And just note them down, you can respond to them later. But I would also like you to respond to each other if you have any questions.
Thank you, Chair. If allow me try to answer the two broad questions. One, if I got it right, was why do you work in the military? And the other one was about the customary laws. So why do you work in the military? Well, first of all, this is a military program. It's a USDOD and one military. So there is a military to military cooperation government. But beyond that, the military in Rwanda is seen as a role model. So for example, if you want to do malaria campaign, if you want to do male circumcision campaign, if you want to distribute water, we start with the military because the general population tends to follow what they do. You see them as examples. So that is one reason why our intervention is the military. But two, we are doing this in light of HIV prevention, and the military tend to be at a high risk of HIV acquisition. One, because they are typically young. Two, they are highly mobile. They are deployed from place to place. Sometimes they are deployed in high HIV prevalence. In the conflict areas, you tend to find high HIV prevention. They are very active. Some people just can say they are attractive. I don't know how true that one is. But in short, the military is high risk population. But we also intervene in the communities surrounding the military installations because ultimately that's where the military is going. So that is why we intervene in the military. The other question was about the customary laws. I did mention in my slide a good number of those laws, but suffice to say there are laws around inheritance, both in terms of property and even wives. There are people, it looks weird, but people inherit brothers, wives, and they pass them, and your brother could have died of HIV. So there are laws prohibiting that. There are laws around land, because there are so many disputes to do with land. His daughter is not supposed to, in those days, to inherit land, and this will create friction, even in houses. So there is also equal distribution, whether you are a man or a woman, whether you are married or not. So there are laws around land. There are laws around forced marriage. Sometimes under 18, it's against the law. You have to be prosecuted. So all these laws have really worked well in our gender programming. And of course, they reduce the gender-based violence. But the bottom line of our program was to do with HIV and AIDS. And it fits very well with GBV and how it is related to HIV.
Thank you. I would just say that the most important element or the starting point for this RAMP intervention is the story that's created, and it needs to be, that story should be created really with the target population that we want to work with, because we have to get at some of the nuances and the language and culture and ideas of that are really going on with those groups. So creating the story is the most important first step. I would add that in addition to films, we've done this approach with a number of different populations in various countries, and we have also done audio stories. We've done a series of comic books, and we also have one booklet that I brought that's on the table over there that's kind of an abridged version of this story, this film, and it's in kind of photonovella format, so that's easier for people to take with them and share with friends, and there's a discussion guide at the back. Also, the ones that I brought are in Portuguese, but it's more pictures really than text, so you can certainly get an idea of that kind of format that can be used as well. In terms of personal anecdotes, I have to say I'm always amazed, because I've been working in HIV prevention for quite some time, and I'm always amazed at how open people often are, and that people like to talk about themselves. So really, in general, given the opportunity, many people will share what seems to me often to be very personal things. I think also it's very important to create that space of safety and security, and people just feeling that it's okay for them to share personal information. The other thing that I find, I often find, and it always has a big impact on me personally, when we use stories and we use some games and different ways of working with people to learn more about what's happening with them, particularly working with most at-risk populations. People often say at the end of these sessions, you know, no one ever asked me before what I think, or what my life is like, or what is going on for me. And just initiating a relationship with another human being at that level, I find, you know, it makes people much more open to hearing a whole range of information or ideas or other things that you're bringing to them, and I think that contributes to people's willingness to share.
Okay. So the question was how to deal with the three different dominant religions in the context of our country, and working on such a complex topic in relation to these religions. Okay, aspects. But it is hard, especially because many religious emphasis that if you're working on sexual and reproductive health, it's a little bit immoral, and you can find different, I can say, discriminative aspects in context of religion and sexual and reproductive health and rights. So what we did in the context of schools and working in schools, the first thing was to reach the parents and the teachers. So when you have their own support, then it's much easier to work on these, I can say, really sensitive stuff. But about introduction and working with the introduction of new subjects in the school, we did analysis of the existing laws. So we find out that existing law several years ago was quite discriminative. So we find out that they introduced religious institutions, they introduced religion classroom subjects in the elementary school. So we find out that in the law there is something like if someone is not religious, then they had to have opportunities to another class. So there was not another class. So we sent this law on the Venetian Commission. They analyze the law and they find out that it's important to introduce new subjects. So in the collaboration with the government, we promote this idea to introduce new subjects related to the healthy lifestyle, but with incorporation of gender and sexual and reproductive health. So it was much easier because of the religion. It was now opposite to the religion, so it's quite more complicated. And we succeeded. In the last 2 years, we doubled the number of young students who are going on this classroom. And from our approximation, every year it will be the same, because it is a little bit hard to choose this subject, but from what we see, it is something really, really, really successful. And so many parents now are attending our sessions to get familiar with the subject and to, understand what is this provide, and what is that for, their own children opportunity.
So, you would like to ask each other or any colleagues or
I have one very quick question, based on the answer you just gave. What age are you working with in the school?
In the school, primary school, from the fifth grade until 9th grade. In the secondary school, lower grade. In university, so until 50 years old. So from 7 years to 50 years.
Would you have any?
No, not a question. Actually, I thought maybe I missed the answer. Well, you asked me why you were working in the military. I hope you didn't have in mind the notion that probably the military is the most GBV, abusers. No, on the contrary, our military is very, very disciplined. In fact, there is a gender desk at every command post that deals with gender issues. Widely severe to go to for psychosocial support, for legal advice and stuff. So it's not that the military seems to be abusing gender. No. We are there because of the reason I mentioned. I just want to make that clear.
Okay. Any other? And now I'll open the house for questions here.
No, I just wanted to clarify Eugene's point that the HIV program that the U.S. government implements is through 5 U.S. government agencies, one of which is Department of Defense. It's USAID, Department of State, the Center for Disease Control, and it's the Peace Corps. So in the larger context of HIV prevention, Eugene is representing 1/5 of the work that goes on in Rwanda.
Any other? Yes.
My questions are for Eugene, actually. It's so good to see how far this has come. Actually, I first came with the first PEPFAR team 7 years ago to help set some of this up, so it's nice to run into you here. I am curious to hear a bit about the participatory process that you mentioned to really talk about and identify the issues of violence. And my second question is also another question about parallel systems of justice. I was recently in Zambia a few months ago and trying to work with our team there that also does work with the DOD, and one of the sort of comments or pushback that I got about trying to integrate GBV services into some of the military or the DOD work that they're doing is that the military doesn't want to have to sort of refer cases out to the justice system, which in Zambia they require, because they have their own sort of system of justice to handle cases within the military. So I'm wondering if you have those issues there and how you deal with that.
Okay. Any other? Do we have any other questions? Yeah?
All right, so thank you very much. I think especially when we talk about HIV prevention, it is nice to talk about these other interventions that are so important. It's so important to have sort of challenge these difficult concepts. We're still dealing with trying to see how we can deal with the HIV epidemic, and obviously it's a lot more complex than sort of the general HIV prevention package that we have. So that's what I wanted to see, is that from these interventions that you've been showing us, and in light of sort of the general or the basic HIV prevention packages with condoms, HIV testing, in some contexts, voluntary medical male circumcision, and all the rest of the general basic individual package. What strategies in taking this forward can you use to ensure that sort of these gender transformative interventions that are more either at the intervention or the community level are really important to be funded and taken forward as well?
Thank you so much for that great question. It's really a pleasure to meet you again. So why we do participatory approach? Let me begin by saying that our interventions, although it is directed to the military, over 80% of people who seek services, be it being abused or any other disease, are civilians. So there is a big component of civilian population. So why do we involve other stakeholders? So we deliberately involve the community because some of the reasons for GBV and in the extension SGBV as well are just social norms or cultural norms. So we realize to change these norms, we must involve local authorities, chiefs. And in Rwanda, every end of the month, I don't know that we don't have community work. At the end of that, there is always a meeting with all the village members, and we discuss issues around GBV as well. That's one of the topics. So we realize involving communities gives a very good avenue to address these issues. So, and it's giving results because people come out in the open and discuss the consequences of it and ways to solve it out. So our program really, on top of being direct in the military, we also go in the community, particularly communities surrounding the military, as I mentioned. The other question was about the justice. There has been no objection from the military vis-a-vis the justice. If anything, really they encourage. This is what we call community policing. So they really encourage people to come up. Even if the victim was seen at the military site, they will always encourage people to be open, and their files are referred to the police for further legal action. Of course, they take forensic evidence, any evidence that will be used for the courts for legal reasons. So there has been no objection whatsoever. If anything, they did encourage. And we've seen that actually military health facilities are more popular than other civilian facilities. I think because the military is disciplined, because they tend to be serious, and there's very good customer care. So we tend to see a very good collaboration between the military and even civilian health facilities and the police for that matter, for future legal follow-up, legal activities, linking with the CID as I mentioned. So I'm not sure that I have adequately answered.
Who can answer this query?
I'll try. She'll be expert. I'm afraid I don't have a very good answer for that, but I think probably there are a couple of different ways of looking at it. Within the U.S. government context, I think it's clear to everyone in the HIV field that the main focus for funding is more treatment-oriented rather than prevention. I think this kind of intervention that we're doing can be part of a treatment program. It can certainly be the kind of space where facility-based and community-based activities could come together. I think that still needs to be sold. We still have to convince some of the donors for that. But I think it's important to look at other, maybe less traditional funding or other sources of funding. And I think that this really is something, this kind of intervention really needs to be conducted by people from the community working in, really created with and by and done for the people where you're working. So it's ideal, I think, for even a community-based organization or something that is really very grassroots. So trying to look at different sources of funding and support to those kind of organizations rather than this really coming in from outside or being something that an international organization has to support.
Sorry, because I was trying to comment to a question, because I do find it's just really challenging to people to take these interventions seriously, but it is something that we need to take.
Do we have any other?
Should I answer also?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so it's quite a complicated question because it's a science which you are, especially in the world where there are many priorities are not recognized. Priorities, we can talk about HR as an example. So in the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's really important to work close to the government, to work with the government to set priorities, because these priorities are something like a star of, I don't know, the orientational star. So we work together with the government on development these different action plans, strategies, so that makes us more recognizable and like organization who can really help with these issues. Especially we are following these Millennium Development Goals and ITPD also. So in the context of Bosnia and Herzegovina, we are recognizable as an organization who are dealing with these elements and who provide support to the government institutions in the, of course, support donors, international donors, to achieve these goals and to I can say, implement a little bit faster ITPD agenda and to move priorities in this new agenda, 2015. So what is something also important is to use evidence-based approaches. So if you are developing only new approaches and not using these external ones which are evidence-based, then it will be hard to set these, I can say, strategies as something that is relevant. So evidence-based approach is something that can be better recognizable and which can be used for, I don't know, promotion of these activities and to be a little bit more recognizable in that one. So something what I suggest to everyone is to really find a way to work close with the government institution because they are sustainable, they can provide sustainable solutions, and also of course not that you are forcing them, but you have to find right advocacy strategies for achieving such stuff. That's it.
Any other? I think we have really professionally gone down well with the time. But I must say that when I visited and what we got, I think was much more than I'm so happy with this sharing this session, especially because we have been dealing with HIV in India for a very long time. I won't say that I'm an activist, but as an academic I have been researching. And there was a time when HIV was actually just was just a symptom, was treated like a symptom, like a disease, and how to prevent the disease. So now with this new concept called gender transformative strategies, I think we are really encircling and properly taking up the whole issue in a more macro level and intervening in a places where, like the way Martha is doing, I have to really check it out myself to see whether the people actually can talk or are very convenient in talking about their personal things. I'll really go back and check it out myself. So I think that we had a wonderful session, even though not many questions, I must say, but then very fulfilling papers. Thank you very much, all of you. All of you must go see this Bhangra there, okay? Bharatanatyam, it's very beautiful. Bharatanatyam.
Hi. Hi, Cindy.